The shovel's impact with flesh jolted Ethan Reed to his core. What he'd thought was disturbed earth on the forest floor had yielded something unimaginable, pale fingers reaching up through Colorado soil. He'd been clearing a spot for the tent when Emma, his 8-year-old daughter, had wandered a few feet away, her curious nature drawing her to what she'd described as the ground-moving daddy. Now, as the afternoon sun filtered through golden aspens, Ethan dug with frantic energy, dirt flying behind him in desperate arcs. His calloused hands, strong from years of carpentry and shaped by grief, trembled as they uncovered expensive fabric beneath the soil, silk torn and earth-stained. Emma stood frozen several yards back, her Hello Kitty backpack hanging from one small shoulder. "Daddy, is there a person in there?" "Stay back, sweetheart." His voice came out steadier than he felt. Beneath the soil, fingers twitched. Whoever was buried was still alive. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Ethan redoubled his efforts, digging with renewed fury as a woman's face emerged from the earth like something from a nightmare. Angular cheekbones streaked with mud, silver blonde hair matted against her skull. But her eyes, steel gray and burning with a fierce will to survive, locked onto his with shocking intensity. He grabbed her shoulders and pulled muscles straining against the suction of packed earth. She broke free with a raw, primal gasp that echoed through the trees, collapsing forward into his arms. Her body shook violently against him as she gulped down precious air. Closer inspection revealed an expensive suit, now reduced to muddy tatters, and a diamond necklace still glinting at her throat. Whoever she wasn't an ordinary hiker who'd stumbled into trouble. Emma approached cautiously, water bottle extended in her small hand. "Is she going to be okay?" The woman's breathing was labored, each inhale a battle. Ethan supported her head, brushing dirt from her face with gentle sweeps of his thumb. "You're safe now." He accepted the water from Emma, helping the woman take small sips. "What's your name? Who did this to you?" The liquid seemed to revive her. Color returned to her ash-pale cheeks as she struggled to speak. "Vanessa," she managed, finally, her voice like gravel. "Vanessa Morgan." Recognition flashed through Ethan. Everyone in Colorado knew that name. Vanessa Morgan was a real estate mogul who'd developed half of Denver's skyline. Her face graced magazine covers and charity galas, and someone had tried to bury her alive. "We need to get you to a hospital." Ethan was already calculating the fastest route back to civilization, the trails he knew from years of hiking these mountains. Vanessa's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping his wrist. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him freeze. "Ethan Reed," she whispered, and ice flooded his veins. "How did she know his name, your wife?" Vanessa continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Lisa Reed, elementary school teacher, died in a car accident 3 years ago on Highway 280. The world tilted beneath him. Emma made a small sound, a tiny intake of breath at the mention of her mother. They rarely spoke Lisa's name aloud, the wound still too raw despite the years. "What are you talking about?" His voice came out harder than intended, protective instinct flaring. Vanessa's grip tightened, her manicured nails digging into his skin. "It wasn't an accident, Ethan. Your wife was murdered, and I'm the reason why." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stopped, leaving only the sound of his thundering heartbeat. Emma stepped closer, her small hand finding her father's shoulder. "You're in shock," Ethan said, though his voice shook. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. Lisa came to me 3 years ago. She'd discovered something about my company's finances. She was tutoring the daughter of one of my accountants and accidentally saw documents she shouldn't have." Ethan's mouth went dry. Lisa had mentioned taking on extra tutoring that summer, saving for Emma's college fund, she'd said, always thinking ahead, planning for a future she'd never see. "She tried to do the right thing," Vanessa continued, her voice stronger now, but edged with old guilt. "She came to me directly instead of going to the authorities. She thought I didn't know about the money laundering, thought she was helping me." A bitter laugh escaped her cracked lips. "She was right. I didn't know. But the moment I started investigating, the moment I asked questions, we both became problems that needed to be solved." "No." Ethan stood abruptly, pulling Emma against him. "No, Lisa died when her brakes failed. The police said, the police found what they were meant to find. Professional killers don't leave evidence. But I know because the same man who ordered her death just tried to bury me alive. Victor Reynolds. The name hung in the air like a curse. Victor Reynolds, another titan of Colorado business. A man whose face adorned hospital wings and university buildings. A man who'd sent flowers to Lisa's funeral. Daddy, Emma's voice was small, confused. What's she saying about Mommy? His protective instincts warred with a desperate need for answers. He knelt beside his daughter, keeping one eye on Vanessa. It's okay, sweetheart. The lady is confused. She's been through something scary, but I've carried this guilt for 3 years, Mr. Reed. Vanessa shook her head slowly. I tried to protect Lisa once I knew what she'd stumbled into, but I was too late. Victor had already decided she was a threat. Stop, his voice cracked. Not in front of my daughter. Vanessa's gaze softened as she looked at Emma, really looked at her for the first time. You have your mother's eyes, she said gently. She was brave, you know, braver than I was. Emma pressed closer to Ethan, but her natural curiosity won out. You knew my mommy? Only briefly, Vanessa replied, but she made an impression. She wanted to make the world better, safer for you. A branch cracked in the distance, sharp as a gunshot, all three tensed heads turning toward the sound. The forest had darkened while they had been talking, shadows stretching long between the trees. We need to move, Vanessa said urgently, struggling to her feet. Ethan automatically steadied her mind, still reeling. They'll come back to make sure the job is finished. They always do. Who? Who's they? Victor has a network. Hired killers, dirty cops, people in every institution you'd turn to for help. Vanessa winced as she put weight on her left ankle. I've been gathering evidence for months, getting close to proving everything. That's why he decided I needed to disappear. Then we're going to the FBI, Ethan said firmly, scooping Emma up despite her protest that she was too big to be carried. The Denver FBI field's office has at least 2 agents on Victor's payroll, Vanessa interrupted. I know because I've seen the payment records. The local police, the state troopers, he has people everywhere. Ethan wanted to argue, to insist she was paranoid, but something in her eyes stopped him. This wasn't the rambling of a traumatized victim. This was a woman who'd survived in the cutthroat world of high-stakes real estate, who'd built an empire from nothing. She knew exactly what she was saying. Another branch cracked closer this time, then another. Daddy, someone's coming, Emma whispered, her arms tightening around his neck. His combat instincts from his army days kicked in, dormant reflexes suddenly sharp. The pattern of movement was wrong for animals. Too deliberate, too coordinated. We're leaving. Now. He half-carried, half-dragged Vanessa toward where they'd parked the truck, Emma clinging to his other side. The 100 yards felt like a mile, every shadow, a potential threat, every sound a warning. Vanessa's breathing grew labored, but she didn't complain, her jaw set with determination. They'd almost reached the trail when a figure stepped out from behind a massive pine blocking their path. The man was dressed in dark tactical gear, the kind Ethan recognized from his military service. Professional, expensive, lethal. His face was obscured by the gathering darkness, but the gun in his hand was clearly visible. Mrs. Morgan, the man said calmly, as if they were meeting at a board meeting instead of in the wilderness. Mr. Reynolds is disappointed. You were supposed to stay put. Ethan set Emma down behind him, his body becoming a shield. His hand found the hunting knife on his belt. Pathetic against a gun, but better than nothing. Tell Victor he should have done it himself, Vanessa said, and Ethan was amazed by the steel in her voice. Hiring others to do his dirty work was always his weakness. The gunman chuckled. He said you'd still have fight in you, said to make it look like a murder-suicide. Distraught father kills the woman who revealed his wife's death wasn't accidental than himself. Leaves the poor orphan girl to find the bodies. Red flooded Ethan's vision. This man was talking about Emma like she was collateral damage, a footnote in their sick plan. His grip on the knife tightened. The girl doesn't need to see this, the gunman continued almost conversationally. She can wait in the truck. We'll make it quick. You're not touching my daughter. Daddy, Emma's voice was tiny, terrified. That single word, filled with trust and fear, crystallized everything for Ethan. Lisa was gone, had been murdered for trying to do the right thing. Now they wanted to take him too. Leave Emma alone in a world full of monsters like Victor Reynolds. Not happening. Emma, he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the gunman. Remember when we practiced what to do if we saw a bear? Make noise and back away slowly, she whispered. That's right. And if that doesn't work, run to the truck and honk the horn until help comes. The gunman shifted impatiently. Touching father-daughter moment. Ethan moved not toward the gunman, but to the side, scooping up a handful of dirt and pine needles and flinging them at the man's face. The gunman reacted instinctively, raising his arm to protect his eyes, and Ethan charged. They went down hard, rolling across the forest floor. The gun flew from the man's grip, disappearing into the underbrush. Ethan heard Vanessa shouting for Emma to run, heard his daughter's footsteps crashing through the leaves. Good girl. The gunman was skilled and trained, but Ethan had something he didn't, a father's desperate fury. They traded blows, brutal and efficient, neither holding back. Ethan's knife was knocked away, but he managed to drive his elbow into the man's solar plexus, earning a grunt of pain. Ethan, Vanessa's voice cut through the fight. She'd found the gun, was holding it with shaking hands but steady aim. Move! Ethan rolled away as the gunman reached for something in his boot. A second weapon. Vanessa didn't hesitate. The shot was impossibly loud in the quiet forest, sending birds erupting from the trees. The gunman clutched his shoulder, cursing viciously. The next one goes in your head, Vanessa said coldly. Tell Victor he failed. Tell him we have everything, all the evidence, all the records. Tell him Lisa Reed's death will be his downfall. The gunman struggled to his feet, still holding his bleeding shoulder. He looked between them, calculating, then apparently decided the odds weren't in his favor. This isn't over, he snarled, backing toward the trees. Reynolds has resources you can't imagine. So do I, Vanessa replied. And now I have something more. Someone who lost everything because of Victor's greed. Someone with nothing left to lose. The gunman disappeared into the darkness, leaving a trail of blood. Ethan knew they should follow, make sure he was truly gone, but Emma's frightened calls from the direction of the truck pulled him away. We need to go, he said, taking the gun from Vanessa's trembling hands. He'll have backup coming. They ran, stumbling over roots and rocks in the deepening darkness. Ethan's truck sat where he'd left it, Emma visible through the windshield, her small hands pressed against the glass. The relief on her face when she saw him nearly broke his heart. He yanked open the door and lifted her out, holding her tight for just a moment. You did so good, baby. So brave, just like... He couldn't finish. Just like her mother. Is the bad man gone? Emma asked, her face buried in his neck. For now. Ethan set her in the back seat, buckling her in with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Vanessa climbed painfully into the passenger seat, her designer suit now completely ruined, blood from various cuts staining the fabric. Ethan started the engine and threw the truck into reverse, not bothering with a three-point turn. He'd driven these logging roads since high school, could navigate them in his sleep. But tonight, every shadow could hide a threat. Every bend could be an ambush. Where are we going? Vanessa asked, gripping the door handle as Ethan took a turn too fast. Somewhere safe. But even as he said it, Ethan wondered if such a place existed anymore. If Victor Reynolds had really killed Lisa, if he had cops and federal agents in his pocket, then nowhere was truly safe. I have a cabin, Vanessa said suddenly. Off the grid, purchased through shell companies. Victor doesn't know about it. It's about 2 hours north near Steamboat Springs. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. Emma had her eyes closed, but he could tell she wasn't sleeping. Her hands were clenched too tight, her breathing too controlled. His little girl trying to be brave in a world that had suddenly become terrifying. Why should I trust you? He asked Vanessa quietly. You just admitted you're the reason my wife is dead. Vanessa was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with 3 years of guilt. You shouldn't trust me. But right now, I'm the only one who can help you get justice for Lisa. And like I told our friend back there, you have nothing left to lose. I have Emma. I have everything to lose. Which is exactly why Victor will come after her, Vanessa said bluntly. He knows the power of leverage, of pressure points. As long as he's free, she'll never be safe. None of us will. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. The worst part was that she was right. If even half of what she'd said was true, Victor Reynolds wouldn't leave loose ends. And Ethan, Emma, and Vanessa were 3 very large loose ends. Tell me everything, he said finally, from the beginning. Everything about Lisa, about what she found, about what happened to her. As they drove through the Colorado darkness, Vanessa began to speak. She told him about Lisa's discovery, financial records, showing millions in drug money being laundered through real estate developments, about how his wife had tried to be discreet, coming to Vanessa privately because she'd believed in giving people a chance to make things right. She was supposed to meet with me that day, Vanessa said softly, the day she died. She was bringing the original documents she'd found, wanted to hand them over personally, but her brakes failed on that curve on Highway 285. Ethan finished numbly. They said it was mechanical failure that the line had worn through. Cut, Vanessa corrected. Precisely cut to fail at highway speeds. Victor has a man who specializes in making murders look like accidents. The same man who was supposed to make my death look like a kidnapping gone wrong. Ethan felt like he was drowning on dry land. Every certainty in his life was crumbling. Lisa's death, the foundation of his and Emma's grief and recovery, had been a lie. She hadn't died because of bad luck or poor maintenance. She died because she tried to do the right thing. Why didn't you go to the authorities after Lisa died? I tried. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. The first detective I approached that ended up dead 2 days later. Apparent suicide. After that, I knew I had to be smarter, more careful. I've spent 3 years gathering evidence, building an airtight case. I was so close. And then Victor found out last week. I'm not sure how. Maybe I trusted the wrong person. Maybe he had surveillance I didn't know about. She stared out at the darkness beyond the windshield. He invited me to dinner, just the two of us, and over a very expensive bottle of wine told me I had two choices: disappear forever or disappear permanently. So you chose option 1. I chose option 3, pretend to accept his offer while planning to expose everything. But he was a step ahead. The men who grabbed me this afternoon were supposed to be my security detail. She laughed bitterly. Never trust anyone who can be bought. They drove in silence for a while, the only sounds the rumble of the engine and Emma's quiet breathing from the back seat. Ethan's mind churned through everything he'd learned, trying to reconcile the narrative of the last 3 years with this new horrible truth. He thought about all the moments that should have been clues. Lisa's sudden anxiety, her insistence on updating their life insurance just weeks before she died, the way she'd held Emma extra long those last few mornings, as if she knew their time was limited, the new locks she'd wanted installed, which he'd dismissed as unnecessary. She knew, he said suddenly. Lisa knew she was in danger. Vanessa nodded slowly. She was smart. She probably realized what she'd stumbled into was bigger than just some financial irregularities. But she was also brave. She didn't run. She tried to fix it. And it got her killed. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. Daddy. Emma's small voice from the back seat made both adults turn. Are we in trouble because of Mommy? Ethan met his daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. Those same warm brown eyes that Lisa had passed down. How did you explain to an 8-year-old that her mother had been murdered, that the world was full of men who would kill to protect their wealth? No, sweetheart, he said firmly. We're not in trouble because of Mommy. Some bad people did bad things, and now we need to stop them. Mommy would want us to be brave and do what's right. Like superheroes, Emma asked hopefully. Yeah, Ethan managed a weak smile. Like superheroes. Vanessa turned to look at Emma properly for the first time since the attack. Your mom was the real superhero, Emma. She stood up to very powerful people because she knew it was right. She was protecting everyone, especially you. Is that why the bad man wanted to hurt us, because Mommy was a hero? The innocent question hit Ethan like a physical blow. From the mouths of babes came the most profound truths. Yeah, baby, that's exactly why. They'd left the main highway now, turning onto increasingly narrow roads that wound up into the mountains. Ethan kept checking the mirrors, looking for headlights that might be following, but saw nothing. That didn't mean they were safe. Professionals knew how to tail someone without being seen. The cabin, he asked Vanessa, how secure is it? Very. I had it built as a safe house after Lisa's death when I realized how deep this went. Solar panels, well-water satellite internet through encrypted channels, and, she paused, a safe room with enough supplies for a month. You've been planning for this. I've been planning for war, Vanessa corrected. Victor Reynolds destroyed everything I built my company on. Integrity, honesty, legitimate success. He turned my life's work into a criminal enterprise without my knowledge. Your wife died trying to expose that. So yes, I've been planning. Ethan felt a strange kinship forming with this woman he'd just met, this millionaire whose world was so different from his own. They were both victims of Victor Reynolds, both carrying guilt and anger in equal measure. But while Ethan had spent 3 years trying to rebuild a life for Emma, Vanessa had spent them planning revenge. "What kind of evidence do you have?" he asked. "Financial records going back a decade. Recordings of meetings where Victor explicitly discussed the laundering operations. Photos of him with known cartel members. Bank statements from offshore accounts. And," she hesitated, "a recording of him discussing Lisa's murder." Ethan nearly drove off the road. "What? From 2 years ago, he was drunk at a private party bragging to another associate about how he'd handled the teacher problem. I had the room bugged. And you've just been sitting on this." "I tried." Vanessa's voice rose defensively. "Do you know what happened to the first journalist I approached with the story car accident? The second overdose despite having no history of drug use. An ambitious young prosecutor who was interested transferred to North Dakota suddenly after his daughter was nearly kidnapped. Victor doesn't just kill problems, he destroys lives piece by piece." Ethan forced himself to breathe, to think past the rage. "So what's different now?" "Now he's overplayed his hand, trying to bury me alive, sending gunmen after a father and child. He's getting desperate sloppy." She pulled out a phone Ethan hadn't noticed before, one of those military-grade encrypted models. "I managed to send copies of everything to a friend at the Washington Post before they grabbed me. If I don't check in within 48 hours, it all goes public." "Then we just need to survive 48 hours. "No." Vanessa shook her head. "We need to do more than survive. We need to get Victor on record confessing. We need something so damning that no amount of lawyers or bribes can make it go away. The evidence I have is good, but a good legal team could create reasonable doubt. We need him to hang himself." Ethan glanced back at Emma, who'd finally fallen asleep exhausted by fear and adrenaline. Her small face was peaceful, trusting even in sleep that her father would keep her safe. The weight of that trust was crushing. "I'm not using my daughter as bait," he said flatly. "I would never ask you to. But Ethan," Vanessa's voice was gentle but firm, "she's already in danger. The moment you pulled me from that grave, you both became targets. Our only way out is through." They turned onto a dirt road that was barely more than a trail winding through dense pine forest. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and shadows. Ethan had to admit if Vanessa hadn't been directing him, he'd never have found this place. The cabin appeared suddenly, a modern structure that somehow blended perfectly with its surroundings. All dark wood and stone with large windows that would offer stunning views in daylight, but now reflected nothing but darkness. "There's a garage around back," Vanessa directed. "We need to get the truck out of sight." As Ethan pulled into the hidden garage, motion sensors triggered soft lighting. The space was larger than expected, with room for 3 vehicles and what looked like extensive storage. Vanessa was already moving despite her injuries, entering a code into a panel by the door. "Biometric scanner," she explained, pressing her thumb to a reader. "The whole place is wired with security. If anyone approaches, we'll know." Ethan carried the still sleeping Emma inside, marveling at the contrast between the cabin's rustic exterior and its high-tech interior. Multiple computer monitors lined one wall, security feeds showing every angle of approach. A full kitchen, comfortable living space, and 3 bedrooms were visible from the main room. "Put her in the back bedroom," Vanessa suggested. "It's the most secure. No windows." As Ethan tucked Emma into a bed that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage, his daughter stirred. "Daddy, are we safe?" "Yeah, baby, we're safe for now." "Is the lady going to help us catch the bad guys who hurt Mommy?" Ethan smoothed her hair back, a gesture that always reminded him painfully of Lisa. "We're going to try, me." Emma nodded sleepily. "Good. Mommy would want the bad guys caught." She yawned. "I love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Princess. More than all the stars." It was their ritual started by Lisa and continued even after her death. Emma smiled slightly and finished it, "More than all the fish in the sea." Ethan kissed her forehead and quietly left the room, closing the door softly behind him. In the main room, Vanessa had pulled up multiple screens of information, news feeds, financial data, what looked like surveillance footage. "Victor knows I'm alive by now," she said without preamble. "His man will have reported back. He'll be mobilizing everything he has to find us. Let him come." Ethan said grimly, checking the gun he'd taken from the gunman. I've got some things to say to him about my wife. You can't think like that, Vanessa warned. Victor Reynolds didn't build his empire by fighting fair. He'll use every dirty trick, every piece of leverage. He'll go after your family, your friends, anyone you've ever cared about. I don't have much family left. Parents gone, Lisa's parents gone. It's just me and Emma. What about work friends, Emma's school? Ethan's stomach dropped as he thought about the implications. His construction crew, the guys he'd worked with for years. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who'd been so kind after Lisa's death. Their neighbor, elderly Mrs. Chen, who watched Emma after school sometimes. We have to warn them, he said urgently. We can't, Vanessa said softly. Any contact we make could lead Victor right to us, or worse to them. The best thing we can do for everyone is to end this quickly. Ethan slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of the day crashing down on him. This morning, his biggest concern had been whether he'd packed enough snacks for their camping trip. Now he was hiding in a safe house with a millionaire. His wife's murder had been revealed, and his daughter was in mortal danger. Tell me about Victor Reynolds, he said finally. Everything. If we're going to war, I need to know my enemy. Vanessa poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle that probably cost more than Ethan made in a week and began to talk. She painted a picture of a man who'd started with nothing, building a business empire through brilliance and brutality in equal measure. Most people only see the philanthropist, the self-made success story, she explained. Few know how he got his start. Victor Reynolds had grown up in desperate poverty in South Chicago. His mother, working 3 jobs to keep them afloat, had borrowed money from the wrong people. When she couldn't pay, they made an example of her. Victor, only 13, had found her body. He doesn't just defeat his enemies, he annihilates them, Vanessa continued. Former partners ended up bankrupt or dead. Competitors found their businesses mysteriously failing. Anyone who crossed him learned the true meaning of regret. That explains the ruthlessness, but not the financial crimes, Ethan observed. It's all connected. Victor built a legitimate business first, construction, then real estate development. But legitimate businesses have limits, regulations, oversight. Victor had spent his life feeling powerless. Once he had power, he couldn't accept any constraints on it. Vanessa took a sip of her whiskey. About 7 years ago, he started laundering money for certain international clients. Small amounts at first, then larger. By the time Lisa stumbled onto it, it was hundreds of millions. Vanessa pulled up a photo on one of the screens. He has a son, Daniel, 25, being groomed to take over the empire. But Daniel has a conscience his father lacks. He's our way in. Ethan studied the photo. Daniel Reynolds looked like a younger, softer version of his father. Same sharp features, same expensive suit, but his eyes lacked the cold calculation that marked the older Reynolds. You want to use his son against him. I want to show his son what his father really is. Daniel idolizes Victor, thinks he's a tough but honest businessman. If Daniel knew about the murders, the drug money, the innocent people destroyed, he might help us. Or he might warn his father and get us all killed, Ethan pointed out. It's a risk, Vanessa admitted, but we need an ally inside Victor's organization. Someone who can get us close enough for him to incriminate himself. You have a plan. Victor is hosting a charity gala in 3 days. 500 of Colorado's elite all gathered to celebrate his philanthropic efforts. Her voice dripped with disgust. He'll be announcing a new children's hospital wing, named after himself, of course. You want to confront him at a public event. I want to destroy him at his moment of triumph. Can you imagine all those cameras, all those witnesses when the truth comes out about what he really is? Ethan could imagine it. He could also imagine the dozens of ways it could go wrong, ending with bullets and blood, and Emma growing up an orphan. There's another way, he said slowly, an idea forming. You said he likes to handle problems personally when they get complicated enough. His ego demands it. He needs to be the one to deliver the killing blow. Yes, that's his pattern. Then we make ourselves the perfect problem. So tempting, so close that he has to come himself. But we control when and where. Vanessa's eyes sharpened with interest. You were military, army, 2 tours in Afghanistan. I know about setting ambushes, about making the enemy come to you on your terms. This isn't Afghanistan. Victor won't come alone. No, but he'll come. If we play this right, if we make him angry enough, desperate enough, his ego won't let him stay away. Ethan stood pacing as the plan solidified. You said you have recordings of him discussing crimes. Several. Can you doctor them? Make it sound like he's confessing to things he hasn't done yet? Vanessa frowned. That would destroy their value as evidence. Not those recordings, new ones. We make him think we have something even more damaging. Something that threatens not just his freedom but his legacy, his son's respect. We make him come to us to get it. And when he comes, we're ready. Cameras, microphones, maybe even a few federal agents who aren't on his payroll. Ethan stopped pacing, meeting Vanessa's gaze. We give him the stage and let him perform. Men like Victor Reynolds always hang themselves if you give them enough rope. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, considering. It could work, but we'd need bait, something irresistible. We have it, Ethan said grimly. Me, the husband of the woman he murdered, the father protecting his daughter, the perfect victim for him to silence. And you, the woman who should be dead, who knows all his secrets. We're the loose ends he can't afford to leave untied. You're talking about making us targets. We already are targets. This way we're targets on our own terms. Vanessa stood walking to the window despite the darkness beyond. Lisa would have liked you, she said suddenly. The way you think, the way you protect your daughter while still fighting for what's right. She chose well. Ethan's throat tightened. It was the first time in 3 years someone had talked about Lisa as more than just a victim, as someone who'd made choices, who'd had agency even in the face of danger. She would have liked you too, he managed. She always respected people who built something from nothing, who earned their success. I didn't earn it, Vanessa said bitterly. It was all built on blood money I didn't even know about. You didn't know, and when you found out you fought back, that matters. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Two people brought together by tragedy, united in purpose. Outside, the Colorado wilderness stretched endlessly. But inside this high-tech cabin, they were planning to take down one of the most powerful men in the state. We'll need help, Vanessa said finally. I have contacts, people who've been waiting for the right moment to move against Victor. A judge who stayed clean despite multiple bribe attempts. An FBI agent in Washington who's been building a case for years. A journalist who's been documenting suspicious deaths connected to Victor's businesses. Can we trust them? We can trust that they want Victor gone as much as we do. That will have to be enough. Ethan thought about Emma sleeping in the next room, trusting him to keep her safe to make the world right again. He thought about Lisa, brilliant and brave. Lisa who died trying to do the right thing. He thought about all the other victims of Victor Reynolds' greed, all the families destroyed, all the lives cut short. Make the calls, set it up. In 3 days at that charity gala, Victor Reynolds learns what justice looks like. Vanessa turned from the window, and for the first time since he'd pulled her from the ground, she smiled. It was sharp and dangerous, the smile of someone who'd been pushed too far and had decided to push back. He won't know what hit him, she promised. As Ethan settled in for a sleepless night of planning and preparation, he thought he heard Lisa's voice on the wind, gentle and approving. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe it was wishful thinking. But he chose to take it as a sign. They were doing the right thing. They were finishing what she'd started. The hunt for Victor Reynolds had begun. Morning came too quickly, gray light filtering through the cabin's windows. Ethan had managed perhaps 2 hours of fitful sleep, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. The smell of coffee drew him to the kitchen, where he found an unexpected domestic scene. Emma giggling as Vanessa attempted to make pancakes. Daddy, Miss Vanessa, is making special pancakes with chocolate chips. Ethan accepted a cup of coffee from Vanessa, noting the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept either. You didn't have to do this. I figured we all needed something normal, Vanessa said quietly before everything changes. As they ate breakfast together, Ethan's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He tensed, but Vanessa nodded for him to answer. He put it on speaker. Mr. Reed. The voice was smooth-cultured and somehow familiar. This is Daniel Reynolds. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Across the table, Vanessa went very still. Emma looked between them, sensing the sudden tension. I believe you have something that belongs to my father. Or rather, someone. Your father tried to bury her alive, Ethan said, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. She doesn't belong to anyone. There was a pause. I'm not calling on my father's behalf, Mr. Reed. I'm calling to warn you. He's mobilizing every resource he has. Private military contractors, corrupt law enforcement people you wouldn't believe have been bought. You have maybe 6 hours before they find you. Why are you telling us this? Miss Morgan, Vanessa spoke up, and Ethan heard Daniel's sharp intake of breath. I'm glad you're alive. I didn't know about any of it. Not until last night when Father was screaming at his men about their failure. I heard him say things about a teacher, about murders made to look like accidents. Your father killed my wife. Ethan said, the words still feeling strange on his tongue. I'm beginning to understand that, Daniel said quietly. I've spent the night going through his private files. The things I've found. God, I think I'm going to be sick. Then help us, Vanessa urged. You know your father better than anyone. Help us stop him. I can't directly betray him. He's still my father, despite everything. Daniel paused, seeming to wrestle with himself. There's a federal prosecutor in Denver, Christina Martinez. She's clean, completely untouchable. Father tried to buy her 3 times and failed. If you can get to her with your evidence, she'll listen. How do we know this isn't a trap? You don't, Daniel admitted. But I'm also going to tell you something else. Father is at his hunting lodge near Vale right now planning your deaths. He'll be there until tomorrow morning. Then he's coming back for the gala. If you wanted to know where he is when he's relatively unguarded, well now, you know. The line went dead. Ethan looked at Vanessa, who was already pulling up information on her laptop. The hunting lodge, she murmured. I know it. Isolated private road. Only one way in or out. It would be perfect for a confrontation. Or perfect for an ambush, Ethan countered. Daddy, who was that? Emma asked, syrup on her chin. Was it another bad man? Ethan wiped her face gently. We're not sure yet, sweetheart. He might be trying to help because his daddy is the really bad man. Emma's perceptiveness sometimes amazed him. So he's a good guy, even though his daddy isn't. Maybe. People are complicated, Em. Sometimes good people have bad parents, and they have to decide what kind of person they want to be. Emma nodded seriously. Like when Jessie at school has a mean mom, but Jessie is really nice anyway. Something like that. Vanessa's phone rang, one of her encrypted lines. She answered carefully, then her face transformed with relief. Judge Harrison, she mouthed to Ethan. The conversation was brief but promising. The judge was willing to issue warrants, but they needed more concrete evidence, something irrefutable. We need Victor on tape confessing, Vanessa reported after hanging up. The judge said, get me that and I'll have federal marshals there within minutes. After she hung up, Ethan and Vanessa looked at each other. The same thought was clearly running through both their minds. The hunting lodge, Ethan said slowly. If we could get there, confront him while he's planning our murders. It's insane, Vanessa said, but her eyes were already calculating distances, resources, possibilities. He'll have guards, security systems. But he won't expect us to come to him. He's the hunter. We're supposed to be the prey. What about Emma? Vanessa glanced at the little girl who was drawing pictures at the table, seemingly absorbed in her art, but Ethan knew she was listening. I know someone, Ethan said after a moment. My old army buddy Jack Martinez lives completely off the grid in Wyoming. Owes me his life from Kandahar. He could keep her safe. I don't want to go away, Emma said without looking up from her drawing. I want to stay with you, Daddy. Ethan knelt beside his daughter, taking her small hands in his. Remember when Mommy used to read you the story about the brave knight? Emma nodded, her lower lip trembling slightly. Sometimes the knight had to make sure the princess was safe in the castle while he went to fight the dragon. That didn't mean he loved the princess any less. It meant he loved her so much he needed to know she was protected. But what if the dragon hurts you? Emma's voice was very small. Then Jack will take care of you and you'll know that Daddy was brave, just like Mommy was brave. Emma threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight. I don't want you to be brave. I want you to be safe. Ethan held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, memorizing the feeling of her small arms around his neck. Sometimes we have to be brave so that the people we love can be safe. But I promise you, I will do everything I can to come back to you. Vanessa turned away, giving them privacy, but Ethan saw her wipe at her eyes. Whatever else she was, whatever guilt she carried, she understood the weight of what they were asking. 2 hours later, Jack Martinez arrived in a battered pickup truck that had seen better decades. He was exactly as Ethan remembered him, 6'4", built like a mountain with kind eyes that had seen too much war. "Brother," Jack said, simply pulling Ethan into a bear hug. "Been too long, Jack. This is my daughter, Emma." Jack knelt down to Emma's level, his massive frame somehow becoming less intimidating. "Hey there, little warrior. Your dad tells me you like horses." Emma's eyes widened. "You have horses?" "3 of them, and they all need someone to feed them apples and brush their manes. Think you could help me with that?" For the first time since they'd fled the forest, Emma smiled genuinely. As Jack loaded Emma's hastily packed bag into his truck, Ethan pulled him aside. "If something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," Jack interrupted. "But if it does, she'll be my daughter. I promise you that." They watched the truck disappear down the mountain road, Emma's small hand waving from the window until they couldn't see her anymore. Ethan felt like a piece of his soul had been torn away. "You did the right thing," Vanessa said softly. "Then why does it feel so wrong?" "Because you're a good father." Lisa chose well. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Vanessa had equipment Ethan hadn't expected. Professional recording devices, tiny cameras that could be hidden anywhere, even what looked like body armor. "I told you I'd been preparing for war," she said when she caught his surprised look. They studied the layout of Victor's hunting lodge, memorizing every entrance, every window, every possible escape route. Vanessa had old architectural plans from when the lodge was built and satellite images from various angles. "There's a service entrance here," she pointed to a spot on the blueprint. "The catering company uses it during his parties. It's usually less guarded." "How many men will he have?" "Normally 4 or 5, but given what's happening, could be double that. So we're walking into a fortress with maybe 10 armed guards to confront a man who's killed multiple people." "When you put it like that, it sounds like suicide." "Isn't it?" Vanessa looked at him steadily. "Maybe, but Lisa didn't die for nothing. If we can expose Victor, if we can get justice, then her death meant something. Isn't that worth the risk?" Ethan thought about Lisa, about her fierce determination to always do the right thing. He thought about Emma growing up in a world where men like Victor Reynolds could murder with impunity. He thought about all the other victims, all the other families destroyed. "Yeah," he said finally, "it's worth it." They left as the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The drive to Vale was tense, neither speaking much, both lost in their own thoughts. Ethan kept checking his phone, looking at pictures of Emma, of Lisa, reminding himself why this mattered. "Tell me about her," Vanessa said suddenly. "Lisa, what was she like beyond what I knew?" Ethan found himself smiling despite everything. "She was terrible at cooking. Could burn water, I swear, but she'd try anyway. Always experimenting with some new recipe she'd found online. The smoke alarm was basically our dinner bell." Vanessa laughed, a surprised sound. "I wouldn't have guessed that." "She loved thunderstorms. Would sit on the porch during them, just watching the lightning. Said it reminded her that nature was bigger than any human problem." His voice softened. "She read to Emma every night, did all the voices for different characters. She could make anyone laugh even on their worst day." "She sounds wonderful." She really was." Ethan's voice caught. "She deserves so much better than what happened to her." "We're going to make it right," Vanessa said firmly. "Tonight, we make it right." The hunting lodge materialized through the trees like a specter from a Gothic novel. Vast and imposing, its a stone facade and timber accents blended wealth with wilderness, illuminated from within, while darkness enveloped the surrounding forest. Ethan parked the truck a quarter-mile away, concealed behind a stand of pines that would shield it from casual observation. 3-hour drive, just to walk straight into the lion's den," he murmured, checking his watch. It was just after midnight. "You sure you want to do this?" Vanessa's voice carried a note of concern that surprised him. "No," Ethan admitted, "but I don't see another option. If Daniel's intel is accurate, Victor will be here until morning. After that, he'll be surrounded by security and admirers at that charity gala." They gathered their equipment, the recording devices, the miniature cameras, a flashlight with the beam covered in red cellophane, to preserve their night vision without broadcasting their presence. Ethan strapped on the tactical vest Vanessa had provided, marveling again at her level of preparation. 3 years, she said, catching his glance. 3 years knowing this day would come. The perimeter of the property was patrolled by armed guards professionals with military bearing and disciplined movements. Ethan studied their patrol patterns through compact binoculars, noting the timing, the overlaps, the blind spots. It was a formidable security setup befitting a man who had accumulated enemies as methodically as he'd accumulated wealth. There, Ethan whispered after 20 minutes of observation. The service entrance. The guards pass it at 6-minute intervals with a 45-second window between when one leaves the area and the next appears. Enough time, Vanessa asked. It'll have to be. They moved through the forest with deliberate care, Ethan with the muscle memory of military training, Vanessa with unexpected grace for someone unaccustomed to fieldwork. When they reached the edge of the tree line, they paused, waiting for the precise moment. Now, Ethan whispered as the guard turned the corner of the building. They sprinted across 30 yards of exposed ground, reaching the service entrance with 17 seconds to spare. Ethan made quick work of the lock, while Vanessa kept watch, her posture tense but controlled. The door opened with a soft click, just as the distant beam of a flashlight signaled the approach of the next guard. They slipped inside, easing the door shut behind them. The service corridor was utilitarian concrete floors, plain walls, dim lighting, a stark contrast to the opulence they glimpsed through interior doorways. They moved silently, guided by the architectural plans Vanessa had memorized. The sound of voices grew louder as they approached what had to be the main study. Victor Reynolds' distinctive baritone carried through a partially open door. I want them found before dawn. Morgan knows too much, and Reed is a complication we don't need. But the girl has potential value. Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. Vanessa's hand found his forearm, gripping tight enough to remind him why they were there. They needed more than just this, they needed an explicit confession. Positioning themselves where they could see through the crack in the door, they observed Victor holding court. The room was a testament to masculine privilege, leather furniture, hunting trophies, a fireplace large enough to roast a deer. 4 men surrounded him, each carrying themselves with the dangerous competence Ethan recognized from his military days. These weren't ordinary bodyguards, but specialized operators, men who solved problems permanently. The female target was scheduled for disposal at 1400 hours, one of them reported. Confirmation of termination was expected by 1630. Thompson hasn't checked in. Victor swirled amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. Thompson is either incompetent or dead. Either way, I'm disappointed. He took a measured sip. The situation requires a more direct approach now. The Reed girl is our leverage. Once we have her, her father will deliver Morgan to us. What about your son? Another mercenary glanced up from cleaning a handgun. He's been asking questions. Victor's face darkened, revealing a glimpse of the predator beneath the businessman's veneer. Daniel has always been soft, like his mother. He'll learn that survival requires unpleasant decisions, or he'll become a liability. I have contingencies for either outcome. The casual dismissal of his own flesh and blood sent a chill through the corridor. Ethan exchanged a glance with Vanessa, whose expression reflected his own disgust. The teacher was easier, Victor continued, and Ethan felt his muscles lock with rage. So trusting, so naive. She actually thought she was helping by bringing those documents to Morgan. All we had to do was cut her brake line and wait. Physics did the rest. Ethan's hand moved to his gun, but Vanessa's grip tightened, her eyes pleading for patience. They needed more evidence, more explicit statements. Just a little longer. Just like we'll handle Reed and Morgan, Victor continued, gesturing expansively, though I think this time we'll create something more dramatic. A murder-suicide, perhaps grief-stricken widower, snaps, kills the woman he blames for his wife's death, then himself, tragic but tidy. What about the evidence Morgan claims to have? This from the older mercenary whose caution marked him as the veteran of the group. Victor's dismissive wave spoke volumes. What evidence? Financial records that could mean anything. Recordings that can be explained away as business discussions taken out of context. Once Morgan is gone, who will connect the dots? He smiled coldly. My lawyers can bury paperwork for decades. The dead can't file appeals. This was it, everything they needed. Ethan activated the live stream function on his phone, ensuring that Judge Harrison and the others were receiving the feed. Then with a nod to Vanessa, he pushed the door open fully and stepped into the room. How about the husband of the woman you murdered? His voice was preternaturally calm. I might have something to say about it. The reaction was instantaneous. 4 weapons appeared in 4 hands, all pointed at Ethan's chest. Only Victor remained unruffled, merely setting down his glass with deliberate care. "Mr. Reed," he said smoothly, "what an unexpected pleasure, and such poor timing on your part." Vanessa stepped in beside Ethan, chin raised defiantly. "Hello, Victor. Surprised to see me above ground." Now Victor's composure faltered, if only for a second. "Vanessa Morgan, I must say you're looking well for someone who should be fertilizing my forest by now." "You should have made sure the job was finished," Vanessa replied, voice steady despite the arsenal aimed their way. "Hiring others to do your dirty work was always your weakness." Victor circled his desk, studying them with the cold curiosity of a scientist examining specimens. "Interesting. 2 loose ends presenting themselves for trimming. How very convenient." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I assume you're recording this another futile attempt to gather evidence." "We already have all the evidence we need," Ethan said. "But yes, this conversation is being documented." "Pointless," Victor waved a hand. "No judge would admit recordings obtained through breaking and entering, and no prosecutor would risk their career against my legal team. But I admire the effort." "Your son might disagree," Vanessa said, shifting the dynamic. "Daniel seemed quite confident when he called us this morning." Victor's expression hardened. Another disappointment. "Daniel has always been susceptible to manipulation by a pretty face." "You think that's what this is?" Ethan asked. "Daniel being manipulated. It couldn't possibly be that he's finally seen what his father really is." "My son knows nothing," Victor snapped the first crack in his polished facade. "He knows enough to be going through your private files," Vanessa pressed. "Enough to direct us to this lodge. Enough to contact federal prosecutor Martinez with what he's found." Victor's composure slipped further. He pulled out his phone, dialed rapidly. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again with the same result, his complexion darkening with each failure. "Daniel is with the FBI right now," Ethan said, pressing their advantage. "Turning over everything he found in your private safe. The ledgers, the correspondence, the records of payments to hit men. Everything. You turned my son against me." Victor's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "No," Ethan shook his head. "You did that yourself when you became a monster. Daniel's just choosing to be the man you never were: honest, decent, good." The word good triggered something in Victor. He barked a harsh laugh that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. "Good, decent, those are words for weak men, poor men. I built an empire. I created thousands of jobs, donated millions to charity." "Built on blood money," Vanessa interrupted. "Jobs funded by drug cartels. Charity to wash the blood off your hands. The world runs on blood money." Victor's control had fully evaporated, now his voice rising to a shout. "Every fortune, every empire, every success story has bodies buried in its foundation. I just had the courage to do what it needed to be done. Like murdering my wife." Ethan's quiet words cut through Victor's tirade like a blade. Victor turned to him, eyes glittering with malice. "Your wife was collateral damage. She stuck her nose where it didn't belong, just like you're doing now." "Say it," Ethan demanded, needing it explicit on the record. "Say you killed her." Victor paused, then spread his arms in a theatrical gesture of surrender. "Fine, I ordered Lisa Reed's death. I had her brake lines cut. I watched the news report about the accident with satisfaction, knowing a problem had been solved." His smile was cruel. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" "Yes," Ethan said, holding up his phone to reveal the active live stream. "That's exactly what we wanted to hear. And so did the 10,000 people watching right now, including Judge Harrison and Prosecutor Martinez." The blood drained from Victor's face as the understanding dawned. His eyes darted to his mercenaries, but they were already backing away, recognizing the shift in the wind. Hired muscle was one thing. Being recorded as accessories to murder was quite another. "It's over, Victor," Vanessa said, an edge of triumph in her voice. "Federal marshals are already on their way. Your confession is being broadcast live. Your empire is crumbling in real time." Victor's hand moved toward his desk drawer, but Ethan had anticipated this. His gun was out and aimed before Victor's fingers touched the wood. "Don't," Ethan warned. "I've killed before in Afghanistan defending my country, and I'll kill now defending my daughter's future." The only difference is those enemies were more honorable than you. They could hear sirens in the distance, now growing closer with each second. Victor's mercenaries were rapidly disappearing and melting away like snow in sunlight. You think you've won, Victor snarled, his veneer of civilization completely gone. You think this ends with me? There are dozens like me, hundreds. Men who do what needs to be done to keep the world running. Maybe, Ethan acknowledged. But today, right now, one of them falls. And that's enough. That's justice for Lisa. The door behind them burst open as federal marshals swarmed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Victor was forced to his knees, hands cuffed behind his back. As they dragged him away, he turned back one last time, his face contorted with hatred. This isn't over, he shouted. I have lawyers' connections. I'll be out within a year. No, a new voice said from the doorway. You won't. Daniel Reynolds stood there looking far older than his 25 years. He carried a cardboard box filled with file folders and digital storage devices. These are from your private safe father. The complete records, every murder, every bribe, every crime for the last 20 years. I've given copies to the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, and 6 major newspapers. Victor stared at his son with naked shock. Daniel, you're my blood, my legacy. I am, Daniel agreed, his voice weighted with sorrow, which is why I had to stop you to salvage something from our name that isn't soaked in blood. As the marshals dragged Victor away, his curses and threats echoed through the lodge. Daniel watched him go, then turned to Ethan and Vanessa. I've never met either of you before tonight, he said carefully. But I recognize you, Mr. Reed, from the newspaper articles about my father's charitable donations to your wife's school. She was a good teacher. She was, Ethan confirmed, understanding the importance of establishing that they had no prior relationship, no conspiracy, as Victor's lawyers would surely claim. I'm sorry, Daniel said simply. I know it doesn't mean much after 3 years, but I'm sorry for what he did to your family. Ethan studied the young man, seeing genuine remorse in his features. It means something. Thank you for doing the right thing. Daniel nodded and walked away, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of his father's sins. Ethan felt a surge of sympathy. The young man would spend the rest of his life trying to atone for crimes that weren't his. The lodge was quickly transformed into a law enforcement command center. Evidence being cataloged, statements taken, communications equipment established. Ethan and Vanessa found themselves temporarily forgotten in the chaos, sitting side by side on the front steps of the lodge. We did it, Vanessa said, disbelief coloring her voice. We actually did it. Lisa did it, Ethan corrected. We just finished what she started. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The peaks were painted in shades of pink and gold, majestic and indifferent to the human dramas playing out below. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Jack. It was a picture of Emma on a horse, grinning widely, chocolate smeared on one cheek. She's asking when you're coming to get her, the message read. Tomorrow, Ethan typed back. Tell her we got the bad guys and I'll explain everything when I see her. Kiss her goodnight for me. Jack's reply came quickly. Will do, brother. You're all over the news. CNN is calling it the takedown of Colorado's hidden crime lord. Proud of you. Christina Martinez, the federal prosecutor Daniel had mentioned, arrived as the morning sun fully cleared the mountains. She was exactly as Daniel had described, sharp, incorruptible, with the focused intensity of someone who had fought her way through a system designed to exclude her. Mr. Reed, Ms. Morgan, she said, taking a seat beside them on the steps. What you did last night was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. Probably more of the latter, Ethan admitted, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. Definitely, Martinez agreed with a hint of a smile. But it worked. Victor Reynolds' confession, combined with Daniel's evidence, and what you've gathered, Ms. Morgan, we have enough to put him away for life. Multiple life sentences, actually. What about his organization? Vanessa asked. The corrupt cops, the other businessmen involved. We're already moving on them, Martinez assured her. Victor is the type to make deals once he realizes his situation is hopeless. By the time we're done, we'll have cleaned house across 3 states. And Lisa's murder? Ethan asked quietly. Martinez's expression softened. First-degree murder with special circumstances. He'll never walk free again, Mr. Reed. Your wife will have justice. Ethan felt something unravel in his chest, a knot of tension he'd carried for so long, he'd forgotten it was there. Not closure exactly. Lisa was still gone, but perhaps the beginning of peace. His phone rang suddenly. It was Jack, and his voice carried an edge that immediately set Ethan back on alert. "Ethan, you need to hear this. Turn on the news." Martinez led them back inside to a television mounted on the wall of the study. She turned it to a news channel where Victor Reynolds' face filled the screen. But it wasn't footage from his arrest. This was a pre-recorded message clearly prepared as insurance. "If you're watching this," Victor's recorded image said with practiced sincerity, "then I've been arrested on false charges framed by business rivals and a grieving widower who can't accept his wife's accidental death. But I want the people of Colorado to know the truth. Every dollar I've earned, every deal I've made has been to build this state's economy, to create prosperity for all. If I've cut corners, it was to create one. If I've made hard choices, it was to protect what we've all built together." "He's trying to control the narrative," Vanessa said, disgust evident in her voice. But then the screen split and another face appeared. Daniel Reynolds live from what looked like a news studio. "My father just tried to lie to you one last time," Daniel said, his voice calm but resolute. "So let me tell you the truth. My father is a murderer. He killed Lisa Reed and at least 6 others. He laundered money for drug cartels. He corrupted law enforcement and destroyed anyone who opposed him. I know this because I've seen the evidence, because I've heard his confessions, and because I've spent my entire life watching him operate. I'm ashamed to be his son, but I won't be silent about his crimes." The news anchors were clearly stunned, struggling to respond to the unprecedented situation. Ethan felt a surge of respect for Daniel Reynolds. It couldn't be easy to publicly destroy your own father. "That took courage," he said quietly. "He's going to need protection," Martinez noted already on her phone. "Victor still has loyalists who might want revenge." "I'll make sure he gets it," Vanessa promised. "It's the least I can do." As the morning wore on, the full scope of their victory became clear. Victor's confession had indeed gone viral, trending across every social media platform. Other victims of his machinations were coming forward, emboldened by Ethan and Vanessa's success. The house of cards was collapsing in spectacular fashion. Around noon, Martinez approached them with fresh coffee and news. "We've arranged a room for you at a hotel in Denver. Security detail included. You should get some rest before the media circus really begins." Ethan nodded gratefully. "I need to get to Wyoming first. Pick up my daughter." "Of course, we'll arrange an escort." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Victor's legal team is already mobilizing. They're very good and they're very expensive. This isn't over yet." "What can they possibly do?" Vanessa asked. He confessed on live video. "They'll claim coercion, entrapment, that you manufactured evidence. They'll try to create reasonable doubt wherever they can." Martinez's expression was grim. "Just be prepared. The legal system isn't always about justice." "I've learned that lesson already," Ethan said, thinking of how Lisa's death had been so easily dismissed as an accident. After briefing them on next steps and security protocols, Martinez left them to coordinate the continuing investigation. Ethan called Jack to update him and arrange for their arrival in Wyoming that evening. A 5-hour drive under normal circumstances, but with a police escort perhaps less. "Emma's doing great," Jack assured him. "She named one of the horses Sparkle and has been brushing it for hours. She's a natural." "We'll be there tonight," Ethan promised. "Around 8, depending on traffic. Don't tell her everything. I want to explain it myself." "You got it, brother. See you then." They left the lodge in a government SUV with 2 federal agents in the front seats. The drive to Wyoming passed largely in silence, both Ethan and Vanessa lost in their own thoughts, processing the events of the past 24 hours. The magnitude of what they'd accomplished and the danger they'd courted was only beginning to sink in. As they crossed the state line into Wyoming, Vanessa finally broke the silence. "What will you tell Emma?" Ethan had been wrestling with this question since the moment they left the lodge. "The truth, but simplified, that we found the bad man who hurt her mom and that he's going to jail for a very long time. She'll have questions. She always does." A smile touched his lips. "She's so much like Lisa that way, always wanting to understand things to make sense of the world." The expansive Wyoming landscape stretched out before them, endless plains meeting distant mountains under a vast blue sky. The openness felt like a promise of possibility after the claustrophobic tension of the past days. Jack's ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, a sprawling property straight out of a Western film. Ethan could see horses in the pasture, and there sitting on a fence like she belonged there was Emma. She spotted their vehicle and began waving frantically, jumping down to run toward the approaching SUV. Ethan barely had time to exit the vehicle before she launched herself into his arms. "Daddy, did you catch the bad guys? Did you win?" "Yeah, baby," Ethan said, holding her tight against his chest. "We won." Jack approached more slowly, giving them space for their reunion. When he finally reached them, his expression was a mixture of relief and concern. "Glad you made it," he said, clasping Ethan's shoulder. "Congratulations on nailing that bastard. But we need to talk later, after the little one's asleep." Ethan nodded, instantly alert to the undercurrent in his friend's words. "Everything okay?" "For now, but there's been some developments. Nothing that can't wait a few hours." Emma insisted on giving Vanessa a tour of the ranch, the horses, the chickens, the barn cats she'd named. Her exuberance was infectious, and for a brief window of time, they were just three people enjoying a beautiful evening in the countryside. Ethan treasured every moment, knowing how close he'd come to losing it all. After dinner, once Emma had exhausted herself with excitement and finally fallen asleep in the guest room, Jack poured 3 glasses of whiskey and turned on the television volume low. "There's been a development," he said, his weathered face grim in the lamplight. "Victor Reynolds' lawyers called a press conference about 2 hours ago. They're claiming coercion entrapment, saying you and Vanessa manufactured evidence." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "But we have his confession on video live streamed to thousands of people. They're saying it was given under duress, that you threatened him with a gun, that he said what he had to say to survive." Wait, Jack took a sip of his whiskey. "The media is eating it up. They love a twist." "Show me," Vanessa said, leaning forward. Jack changed the channel to a news station where a replay of the press conference was being analyzed by a panel of legal experts. Victor's attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, stood at a podium surrounded by cameras. "My client is a victim of a conspiracy between a disturbed widower and a business rival who's been embezzling from her own company for years. The so-called confession was obtained at gunpoint. We have witnesses who will testify that Mr. Reed and Miss Morgan planned this entire charade to destroy an innocent man." "Innocent," Ethan spat, fury rising in his chest. "Under duress," Jack reminded him gently. "That's what they will argue. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to create reasonable doubt." The attorney continued, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. "Furthermore, we have evidence that Mrs. Morgan has been siphoning funds from Morgan Enterprises for years, funds that mysteriously match the amounts she claims were laundered. We believe she murdered Lisa Reed herself when the teacher discovered her embezzlement and has spent 3 years planning to frame my client for her own crimes." Ethan's fist slammed into the wall with enough force to crack the drywall. Jack grabbed his arm before he could strike again. "Easy, brother. That's exactly what they want you, losing control, looking unstable. Don't give them ammunition." Ethan's phone rang, vibrating against the table. It was Christina Martinez. "I'm watching the press conference," she said without preamble. "It's bad, but it's clever. They're muddying the waters, creating reasonable doubt." "What about the evidence Daniel provided?" Ethan asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "They're attacking that too. They're claiming Daniel was manipulated by Vanessa, that she seduced him and turned him against his father. They've dug up photos of them together at charity events over the years, presenting it as evidence of a long-term relationship." "That's absurd," Vanessa protested. "I barely knew him beyond professional interactions." "It doesn't matter if it's true," Martinez said. "They just need to create enough doubt that a jury might acquit." She paused, and they could hear papers rustling. "I need you both in Denver first thing tomorrow. We need to get ahead of this." Ethan looked toward the room where Emma was sleeping peacefully, unaware that the battle they thought was won had only changed forms. "We'll be there," he promised, ending the call. "This is my fault," Vanessa said, staring into her untouched whiskey. "I should have known Victor would have contingency plans. He always does." "This isn't on you," Ethan countered. "We knew what we were getting into." Jack refilled his glass, studying them both. "What's the plan now?" "You can't go back to your house in Denver. It'll be surrounded by reporters and probably still under surveillance by Victor's people." "I have a few safe houses," Vanessa began, but Ethan cut her off. "No, no more running, no more hiding. We face this head on. He turned to Jack. Can Emma stay here a few more days? Just until we get the legal situation under control. Jack nodded without hesitation. Of course, she's already asking if she can live here forever. Apparently, the horses are more interesting than her toys back home. But the next morning, when Ethan explained to Emma that she needed to stay with Uncle Jack a little longer, she shocked them all with her response. No, she said firmly, her little chin jutting forward in a way that painfully reminded Ethan of Lisa. I'm coming with you, Daddy. We're a team. He knelt to her level, preparing to explain why it wasn't safe, why she needed to stay protected. But the determination in her brown eyes, Lisa's eyes, stopped him. Emma, it might get scary. There are still bad people who might try to hurt us. I know, she said with surprising maturity. But we're superheroes. Remember, we fight bad guys together. Ethan looked up at Vanessa and Jack, seeing his own conflict reflected in their faces. It's your call, Jack said. But for what it's worth, I think she's tougher than any of us are giving her credit for. After a long moment, Ethan nodded. Okay, Emma, we're a team, but you have to promise to follow every instruction immediately and without question. Can you do that? I promise, she said solemnly, then threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, Daddy. The drive back to Denver was tense but uneventful. Emma sat in the back seat, watching the landscape roll by, occasionally asking questions that revealed how much more she understood than they'd realized. She knew Victor Reynolds was the bad man who had hurt her mother. She understood he might still have friends who could be dangerous. And somehow she'd intuited that Vanessa was more than just someone they were helping. Miss Vanessa's our friend now, right? She asked, suddenly breaking a long silence. She's going to help us make sure the bad men stay in jail. That's right, Ethan said, meeting Vanessa's surprised glance. We're all on the same team now. As they approached Denver, the scale of the media interest became apparent. News vans were already staking out the federal building where they were scheduled to meet Martinez. Ethan's phone buzzed constantly with calls from unknown numbers, reporters seeking comment, he assumed. They entered through a secure parking garage, escorted by federal agents to Martinez's office on the 12th floor. The prosecutor looked like she hadn't slept, her desk covered with legal documents and coffee cups. Good you're here, she said, standing to greet them. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Emma, but she quickly recovered, offering a warm smile. Hello there. You must be Emma. I'm Christina. Are you going to help my daddy put the bad men in jail? Emma asked bluntly. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Martinez confirmed, and you're being very brave by being here. She directed them to a small conference room where Vanessa was already waiting, reviewing documents with a team of legal analysts. The room fell silent when they entered, all eyes drawn to Emma. Emma wanted to be here, Ethan explained, challenging anyone to question his parental judgment. She's part of this too. Vanessa immediately stood and approached Emma, kneeling to her level. I'm really glad you're here. There's a special room next door with books and games and a very nice agent named Sarah who would love to show you. Is that okay while the grown-ups talk about boring legal stuff? Emma considered this, then nodded. But you'll call me if you need superhero help. Absolutely, Vanessa promised with a straight face. You're our secret weapon. Once Emma was settled in the adjacent room, Martinez wasted no time outlining the situation. Victor's legal team is running a full-court press. They're attacking everything, the evidence, your credibility, the confession itself. How bad is it? Ethan asked. Bad, but not insurmountable. They're making a lot of noise, but we have facts on our side. She gestured to the monitors on the wall, now displaying various news outlets. The court of public opinion is currently divided. Half the people watching that confession believe Victor is a monster who finally got caught. The other half think you might have set him up. Is there anything else we can use? Vanessa asked. Something Victor's lawyers won't be expecting. Martinez hesitated. Actually, I was going to ask you the same question. Do either of you have any other evidence we haven't discussed? Anything that could counteract their narrative? Ethan thought hard, mentally cataloging everything from the past few days, then remembered something. Lisa's laptop. I never threw it away after she died. It's in our attic. She was meticulous about backing up her work. Martinez's eyes sharpened with interest. Could there be evidence on it related to what she found at Victor's company? I don't know, Ethan admitted. I couldn't bear to go through it after she died. It's just been sitting there. We need to get it, Martinez decided. Now, But we can't send agents to your house. It would tip our hand to Victor's people watching the place. Mrs. Chen, Ethan said suddenly, our neighbor. She still has a spare key from when she used to watch Emma after school. Victor's people wouldn't be watching her. Within the hour, they had established contact with Mrs. Chen, a 73-year-old widow who had been a second grandmother to Emma after Lisa's death. She readily agreed to help, expressing no surprise at the news that Lisa's death had been murder. I never believed it was an accident, she told Ethan over the phone. Lisa was too careful a driver, and she was worried about something those last few weeks. I could tell. Following Ethan's directions, Mrs. Chen retrieved the laptop from a storage box in the attic and drove it directly to the federal building. She arrived 2 hours later, handing over the computer with a fierce determination that belied her age. You get whoever did this to her, she said, patting Ethan's cheek like he was still the young man who had moved in next door 7 years ago. Lisa deserves justice. The technical team went to work immediately, breaking through the password protection. Emma's birthday, followed by Lisa's, a combination Ethan provided, and beginning the painstaking process of searching the hard drive for relevant information. What they found exceeded everyone's expectations. Lisa hadn't just backed up the financial documents she discovered. She had created a detailed record of everything she had found, including scanned documents annotated with her own notes, identifying specific transactions and the shell companies used to disguise them. She had recorded phone conversations she'd overheard while tutoring the accountant's daughter. And most damning of all, she had created a video diary entry the day before she died. Martinez called them into a secure viewing room as the technical team prepared to play the video. Ethan felt his heart hammering against his ribs. He hadn't seen Lisa's face in motion for 3 years, only in photographs that failed to capture her vitality, her expressions, the light that had animated her. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly there she was. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Lisa looked worried but determined, her brown eyes the same eyes Emma had inherited, serious but unafraid. If something happens to me, she began, her voice strong despite the tension visible in her shoulders. I want people to know it wasn't an accident. I've discovered something terrible. Victor Reynolds and several other prominent businessmen are laundering money for drug cartels through real estate developments. I have proof which I'm going to give to Vanessa Morgan tomorrow. She doesn't know what's happening in her company. I'm sure of it. Lisa paused, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so achingly familiar that Ethan had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. But Victor Reynolds knows I know. I've seen cars following me. My phone has been acting strange. I think I'm in danger. She took a deep breath, visibly gathering her courage. Ethan, if you're watching this, I love you. Take care of our little girl, and please don't let them get away with it. Be brave, my love. Be brave for both of us. The video ended, freezing on Lisa's face, determined, unafraid, alive with purpose. The room was silent except for Ethan's ragged breathing. Even Martinez looked shaken. That changes everything, she said quietly. That's premeditation. That's Lisa herself identifying her potential killer before the crime occurred. But the technical team wasn't finished. As they continued their forensic examination of the laptop, they discovered even more evidence: emails Lisa had sent to herself documenting suspicious transactions, photos of Victor meeting with known cartel members taken through the window of the accountant's home office, and most damningly, a recording of a phone call where Victor's voice could be heard discussing the teacher problem just days before Lisa's death. This is it, Martinez said, a fierce light in her eyes. This is exactly what we needed. We file this with the court tonight, and Victor's bail hearing tomorrow becomes a very different conversation. They worked through the night preparing the new evidence for court. Emma fell asleep on a couch in Martinez's office, and Vanessa covered her with a jacket, a gesture of tenderness that didn't escape Ethan's notice. He found himself thinking that Lisa would have approved of Vanessa, of her determination, her courage, her kindness toward Emma. As dawn broke over Denver, Martinez called them together for a final briefing. The bail hearing is at 9. We've filed the new evidence and Judge Harrison has already reviewed it. Victor's attorneys will be receiving copies right about now. She smiled grimly. I'd pay good money to see their faces when they realize what they're up against. Ethan glanced at the sleeping Emma. What about my daughter? I don't want her in that courtroom. My assistant has volunteered to stay with her here, Martinez assured him. The building is secure, and there's a playroom on the third floor where the children of witnesses often wait during sensitive cases. When they arrived at the courthouse 2 hours later, the scene outside was chaos. Protesters on both sides held signs either condemning Victor or proclaiming his innocence. Media trucks lined the street, reporters doing live stand-ups with the courthouse steps as their backdrop. Federal marshals escorted them through a side entrance bypassing the circus. Inside the courtroom, Victor sat at the defense table surrounded by at least 5 attorneys. He looked immaculate in a custom suit, the picture of an unjustly accused businessman. When he saw Ethan, he offered a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. Daniel Reynolds sat behind the prosecution table, steadfastly avoiding looking at his father. He nodded slightly to Ethan and Vanessa as they entered, a gesture of solidarity that wouldn't be lost on the jury when the case eventually went to trial. Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, called the court to order. What followed was a legal battle of breathtaking intensity. Victor's lead attorney, the same sharp-faced woman from the press conference, argued eloquently that her client was being railroaded, that the evidence against him was obtained illegally, that he was a pillar of the community being framed by a disturbed widower and a vindictive business rival. Martinez countered with methodical precision, presenting the new evidence from Lisa's laptop piece by piece. When Lisa's video diary was played in open court, a hush fell over the room. The raw emotion, the clear identification of Victor as a threat, the timing just 1 day before her death, it was devastating. Victor's attorney tried to object, claiming the video was hearsay, but Judge Harrison overruled her immediately. The victim's state of mind before her death is absolutely relevant, she said, her voice cold with disapproval, as is her identification of your client as someone she feared. And when the recording of Victor discussing the teacher problem played, several jury members visibly recoiled. The prosecution's audio expert testified that voice analysis confirmed it was indeed Victor speaking, and that the recording had not been altered or manipulated in any way. Then came the most damaging testimony of all. Daniel Reynolds took the stand, visibly uncomfortable but resolute. "State your name for the record." "Daniel Marcus Reynolds." "What is your relationship to the defendant?" Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. "He's my father." "And yet you're testifying against him." "Why?" Daniel looked directly at his father for the first time. "Because he's guilty. Because he murdered an innocent woman. Because if I don't speak the truth, I'm complicit in his crimes." Victor's face contorted with rage, and his attorney had to physically restrain him from standing. Daniel testified for over an hour, detailing conversations where his father had bragged about his power, about his ability to make problems disappear. He produced documents from his father's private safe, including a ledger that detailed payments to the man who had sabotaged Lisa's car. He kept trophies, Daniel said, his voice breaking slightly. News clippings about the accidents, the suicides. He kept them like accomplishments. The defense's cross-examination was brutal. They accused Daniel of being mentally unstable, of having daddy issues, of being manipulated by Vanessa. But Daniel held firm. "I know what I saw," he said. "I know who my father really is, and I know that Lisa Reed deserved better than to die for trying to do the right thing." When Vanessa testified next, she was composed and articulate. She detailed the money laundering operation, how she discovered it only after Lisa had come to her, how she'd spent 3 years gathering evidence, surviving an attempt on her life, and working to expose the truth. The defense tried to paint her as a spurned business partner, a woman scorned, even suggesting she'd been having an affair with Victor that had gone sour. But Vanessa had documentation for everything: financial records, emails, surveillance photos, that contradicted every accusation. Ethan was the last to testify. Martinez had coached him to stay calm, to not let his anger show. But when he looked at Victor sitting there in his expensive suit, all he could see was Lisa's killer. "Tell us about your wife," Martinez began gently. Ethan talked about Lisa, the teacher, the mother, the woman who believed in justice and doing right. He talked about their life together, their plans, their dreams that had been cut short. He talked about explaining to a 5-year-old girl why mommy wasn't coming home. "And when did you learn the truth about her death?" "When Vanessa Morgan told me, after I pulled her from a shallow grave where Victor Reynolds' men had buried her alive." The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, her smile sharp as a blade. "Mr. Reed, isn't it true you've been unstable since your wife's death?" Haven't you been in therapy for complicated grief? Yes, I've been in therapy. My wife died. I was grieving. And isn't it possible that in your grief you were susceptible to Ms. Morgan's manipulation, that she used your pain to turn you against her business rival? Ethan looked at her steadily. The only manipulation here was Victor Reynolds sabotaging my wife's car to crash. Everything else is just truth finally coming to light. You threatened Mr. Reynolds with a gun, didn't you? I defended myself when his hired killers came after my daughter and me. You claim these were hired killers, but where are they? Where's the proof? One of them was shot by Miss Morgan in self-defense. He left blood at the scene. Your client knows exactly who he is and where he went. The attorney tried several more angles, but Ethan remained calm, thinking of Lisa, of Emma, of the justice they deserved. During a recess, Ethan found himself face to face with Victor in the hallway. The bailiffs were close, but not close enough to hear Victor's whispered words. This isn't over. Even if I go to prison, I have reach. You'll never be safe. Your daughter will never be safe. Ethan looked at him with something close to pity. You still don't get it. We already aren't safe. Haven't been since Lisa discovered your crimes. The only way we'll ever be safe is with you behind bars. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. And Victor, your reach isn't as long as you think. Your empire is crumbling. Your son turned against you. You've already lost. Victor's face purpled with rage, but before he could respond, the bailiffs moved in separating them. The hearing lasted 3 days in total. More witnesses, more evidence, more desperate attempts by the defense to create reasonable doubt. But the tide had irrevocably turned. When Judge Harrison finally rendered her decision, her face was stern, with righteous indignation. Bail is denied, she announced. The defendant poses both a flight risk and a clear danger to the witnesses in this case. Furthermore, I am ordering him transferred to maximum security detention until trial. She looked directly at Victor. Mr. Reynolds, based on the evidence presented, I find probable cause to bind you over for trial on all counts, including murder in the first degree with special circumstances. The courtroom erupted, reporters rushing for the exits, Victor's supporters shouting in protest, his lawyers already discussing appeal options. Victor himself stood rigid with fury, staring at Ethan with naked hatred as the bailiffs led him away. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had reached fever pitch. Reporters swarmed toward them, shouting questions, cameras flashing. Martinez had prepared Ethan with a brief statement, knowing the importance of controlling the narrative. My wife Lisa Reed was a teacher. He began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. She believed in truth and justice, in doing the right thing even when it was dangerous. She died because she tried to stop a criminal enterprise that was poisoning our community. Today, the first step toward justice was taken. He paused, making eye contact with the cameras. But I want to be clear, this isn't a victory. Lisa is still gone. Other victims of Victor Reynolds are still gone. This is just accountability, finally, for crimes that should never have happened. Looking directly into the nearest camera, he continued, if you're watching this and you know something wrong is happening, speak up. Be brave like Lisa was brave. Because silence in the face of evil is complicity. And if you're someone who thinks you're above the law, who thinks money and power make you untouchable, remember Victor Reynolds. Remember that justice may be slow, but it comes for everyone eventually. A reporter shouted a question about his plans now. Ethan found Vanessa in the crowd and motioned for her to join him. We're going to go home, he said simply. We're going to try to heal, and we're going to live lives that would make Lisa proud. As they walked away from the courthouse, flanked by federal agents providing security, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not happiness that would take time, but possibility. The possibility of a future without the shadow of Lisa's killer walking free. The possibility of peace. That evening in Ethan's modest home, they shared a quiet dinner. Vanessa had insisted on cooking, producing a surprisingly good lasagna that had Emma asking for seconds. The little girl had set the table with careful precision, placing a vase of wildflowers in the center, the last autumn blooms collected from the backyard that morning. The house felt different somehow, warmer, more alive than it had in years. Federal agents were stationed outside, a precaution Martinez had insisted upon until Victor's entire network was dismantled. But inside, for these few hours, they could pretend that normal life had resumed. Miss Vanessa, are you going to stay with us? Emma asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled over the meal. Vanessa looked at Ethan, who nodded slightly. They discussed it earlier. With her assets frozen pending the investigation and death threats arriving daily from Victor's loyalists, she had few options. For a while, if that's okay with you, Vanessa answered carefully. Emma considered this seriously, fork paused midway to her mouth. You can have the guest room. It's not as nice as your house probably was, but Daddy fixed it up real good. He's good at fixing things. Yes, Vanessa agreed softly, meeting Ethan's eyes. He is. After Emma was tucked into bed, Ethan and Vanessa retreated to the back porch with coffee. The night was clear, stars scattered across the Colorado sky like diamonds on black velvet. The same stars Lisa had loved to watch, the same ones that had witnessed so much pain, and now perhaps the beginning of healing. Do you think it's really over? Ethan asked, watching his breath form clouds in the cool air. Almost, Vanessa replied. The financial investigation is just beginning. Victor had his fingers in dozens of legitimate businesses. The prosecutors will be untangling his affairs for years. What about your company? Vanessa stared into her coffee, shoulders slumping slightly. I don't know if it can be saved, or if it should be. She looked up at the night sky. How do you rebuild something when the foundation was rotten? You start again, Ethan said simply. Use the good parts, discard the rest. Is that what you did after Lisa? The question caught him off guard, but he considered it seriously. I tried. Some days were better than others. Having Emma helped gave me purpose, a reason to get out of bed each morning. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it, a small smile playing at her lips. It's Daniel, she said. He's staying in a safe house outside Boulder. Says he wants to meet tomorrow. Has ideas about dismantling his father's network more quickly than the feds can. Will you go? Yes. He deserves a chance to make things right, don't you think? He lost everything too. Not everything, Ethan disagreed. He found his conscience. That's worth something. The next morning brought with it a sense of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the chaos of recent days. Emma getting ready for school, Ethan preparing her lunch, Vanessa making coffee. Like they'd been doing this dance for years instead of days. But normalcy, Ethan had learned, was often a fragile illusion. The call from Emma's school came just after noon, shattering the tentative peace they'd established. Mr. Reed, the principal's voice was tense. We've had an incident. A man came to the office claiming to be Emma's uncle, saying he needed to pick her up for a family emergency. When we asked for ID, according to protocol, he fled. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He was in his truck before the call ended, breaking every speed limit between his construction site and the school. He found Emma safe in the principal's office, coloring quietly while 2 police officers took statements from the staff. The man who had tried to take her had vanished, but the security cameras had captured everything. Ethan recognized him immediately from the footage, one of Victor's security team, a man who had been present at several of Victor's charity events that Ethan had attended with Lisa years ago. We're increasing patrols around the school, Officer Rodriguez assured him, but Ethan knew that wouldn't be enough. Victor might be in jail, but his influence clearly extended beyond bars. He brought Emma home early, calling Vanessa on the way. She was already there when they arrived, having cut short her meeting with Daniel. This changes everything, she said once Emma was occupied with her tablet in the next room. We need to consider relocating, maybe even witness protection. I'm not running, Ethan said firmly. This is our home. Emma's school, my business. None of that matters if you're dead, Vanessa interrupted, her fear manifesting as anger. Victor may be locked up, but he still has resources, loyal people. And now we know Emma is a target. Ethan paced the living room, mind racing through options. There has to be another way. Something proactive rather than reactive. Vanessa studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Daniel mentioned something today. Victor has a command center somewhere his network continues to operate from, a warehouse on the outskirts of Denver. If we could find it, get evidence of ongoing criminal activity, we could take down the rest of his organization, Ethan finished. Cut the head off the snake. It's dangerous. So is doing nothing. Their discussion was interrupted by the doorbell. Ethan approached cautiously, hand moving to the gun he now kept in a holster at his hip. Through the peephole, he saw Christina Martinez standing on his porch, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. We have a problem, she said as soon as he opened the door. Judge Reynolds has been arrested for taking bribes from Victor. The same judge who granted Victor special privileges before his bail hearing. I thought you said he couldn't get out. He can't not now, but before Reynolds was arrested, he signed an order allowing Victor expanded privileges, more phone time, fewer restrictions on visitors. He's running his organization from inside prison. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle over him. The victory they'd thought was complete was anything but. Victor Reynolds was wounded, caged, but still dangerous, perhaps even more so now that he had nothing to lose. What do we do? Vanessa asked, appearing behind Ethan. Officially, I need to advise you both to stay away from this. Let law enforcement handle it. Martinez's expression turned grim. Unofficially, Daniel Reynolds came to me with information about his father's command center. We're planning a raid, but we need solid evidence before we move. The kind that won't be thrown out of court because of chain of custody issues. You want us to get it for you, Ethan realized. I'm not asking that, Martinez clarified quickly. That would be illegal and unethical. I'm simply sharing information about an ongoing investigation with potential witnesses. The message was clear. They could help, but they would be on their own if things went sideways. I'll need to make arrangements for Emma, Ethan said, the decision already made. Jack, Vanessa suggested. Ethan shook his head. No, they'll be watching him now, my sister in Chicago. Victor's people don't know about her. She changed her name after her divorce, uses her ex's last name. Within hours, Emma was on a flight to Chicago, accompanied by an undercover federal agent posing as Ethan's cousin. She hadn't wanted to go, had clung to Ethan at the airport with tears streaming down her face. I want to stay with you and Miss Vanessa, she had pleaded. I know, sweetheart, but just for a little while. Remember how the knight had to keep the princess safe? While he fought the dragon, Emma nodded, sniffling. But you already fought the dragon, Daddy. Sometimes dragons have friends, Ethan explained gently, and we need to fight them too. Now as darkness fell, Ethan and Vanessa prepared for their mission. Daniel had provided detailed schematics of the warehouse security protocols, guard rotations. Jack arrived with equipment, body armor, surveillance gear, communication devices. This is insane, he said, checking Ethan's tactical vest for the second time. You're not cops. You're not even federal agents. We're witnesses gathering evidence, Ethan replied, repeating Martinez's careful phrasing. Jack's snort conveyed his opinion of that semantic distinction. Sure, and I'm Santa Claus. The warehouse was located in an industrial area surrounded by similar buildings that were largely abandoned after hours. They parked 3 blocks away, approaching on foot through shadows. Ethan fell back into his military training, moving silently despite the years of civilian life. Vanessa matched his stealth, surprising him with her competence. 5 years of self-defense training after Lisa died, she explained when she caught his questioning glance. I knew this day might come. The warehouse had minimal external security, just enough to appear legitimate without drawing attention. The real protection was inside. According to Daniel, the command center was in the basement behind a series of security doors. They found an employee entrance with a key card reader. Daniel had provided a clone card which Vanessa slid through the mechanism. The light turned green. Inside, the main floor looked like any other warehouse: crates, forklifts, shipping manifests. But as they moved deeper into the building, guided by Daniel's directions through their earpieces, the atmosphere changed. More cameras, reinforced doors, armed guards patrolling in irregular patterns. They waited in a storage closet as 2 guards passed, then sprinted down a corridor toward a freight elevator. Daniel had emphasized that timing was crucial. The command center was manned 24/7, but between 2 and 3 a.m., staffing was minimal. The elevator required another key card and a 6-digit code, which Daniel provided. They descended into the basement, tension mounting with each floor they passed. The doors opened to reveal a space that looked nothing like a warehouse basement. Instead, it resembled a high-tech operations center, multiple computer stations, surveillance feeds, communications equipment. 2 men sat at workstations, backs to the elevator. Neither had noticed its arrival, too focused on their screens. Ethan moved first, swift and silent. He subdued 1 man with a sleeper hold, while Vanessa used a taser on the other. Within seconds, both were unconscious and zip-tied to their chairs. We have maybe 10 minutes before they miss their check-in, Daniel warned through the earpiece. The evidence should be on the main server, red cabinet against the back wall. Vanessa went to work on the computers while Ethan searched filing cabinets and drawers. What they found exceeded their expectations: detailed records of ongoing criminal operations despite Victor's imprisonment, offshore accounts blackmail material on judges and politicians, plans for eliminating witnesses including Ethan and Vanessa. But the most damning discovery came in a locked drawer. Inside was a USB drive labeled simply contingencies. Vanessa plugged it into a computer, and what they saw made her gasp. It was a video of Victor recorded before his arrest. He detailed plans for what he called the reckoning, a systematic elimination of everyone who had testified against him, starting with Daniel, then Vanessa, saving Ethan for last. But not before he watches his daughter disappear. Victor's recorded voice said with chilling calm, 50 million to whoever completes the list, transferable upon verification of all targets eliminated. He's put bounties on all of us, Vanessa whispered, face pale in the blue light of the monitor. $50 million. Copy everything, Ethan ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. We need to get this to Martinez now. They worked quickly, transferring files to encrypted drives, photographing physical documents. Following Daniel's instructions, they also planted tiny bugs that would allow the FBI to monitor the facility remotely. Time's up, Daniel warned in their ears. Next guard rotation in 2 minutes. They had just reached the elevator when alarms began to blare throughout the facility. One of the bound men must have regained consciousness and triggered a silent alert. Change of plans, Ethan said, pulling Vanessa toward an emergency stairwell Daniel had identified as their backup exit. We fight our way out. The stairwell door had just closed behind them when they heard the elevator doors open and shouts of alarm. Footsteps pounded after them as they raced upward, taking the stairs 2 at a time. They emerged on the main warehouse floor to find it illuminated by flashing red emergency lights. Guards were converging from multiple directions. Ethan led Vanessa behind a stack of shipping containers, assessing their options. East loading dock, Daniel directed through their earpieces. It's the furthest from the security office. I'll have a car waiting. They moved from cover to cover, avoiding direct confrontation where possible. When a guard appeared directly in their path, Ethan took him down with practiced efficiency, securing his weapon before moving on. The loading dock was 30 yards of open space away. As they prepared to make their final sprint, the warehouse's main lights blazed to life, leaving them exposed. Run, Ethan commanded, providing covering fire as Vanessa dashed toward the exit. Bullets pinged off metal containers around them. Ethan felt a sharp burn along his arm. A bullet grazed nothing serious. He returned fire, not aiming to kill, just to keep heads down, while he backed toward the exit. Outside, Daniel waited in a black SUV engine running. They dove into the back seat as he floored the accelerator, crashing through a security gate and onto the street. Did you get it? He asked, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror to check for pursuit. Vanessa held up the encrypted drives. Everything, the whole operation, and your father's reckoning plan. Daniel's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I knew he wouldn't stop, not even from prison. We need to get this to Martinez, Ethan said, applying pressure to his wounded arm. Now. She's waiting at a safe house, Daniel replied, taking a series of turns designed to lose any potential tail. Jack's already there with a medical kit for that arm. The safe house was a nondescript suburban home on the outskirts of the city. Martinez was pacing the living room when they arrived, relief visible on her face when they walked through the door. I was about to call in backup, she admitted. The warehouse security triggered a police response. Local cops are crawling all over the place. Victor's cops, Ethan asked grimly. Some probably, but they won't find anything connecting you to the break-in. Daniel made sure of that. Jack appeared from the kitchen, medical kit in hand. He wordlessly began treating Ethan's arm while Martinez reviewed the evidence they'd gathered. This is incredible, she said, scrolling through files. Bank records, communication logs, the bounty list. This isn't just enough to dismantle Victor's network. It's enough to take down half the corrupt officials in Colorado. Will it be admissible? Vanessa asked. Given how we obtained it, technically no, Martinez admitted, but it gives us probable cause for official warrants. And the bugs you planted are completely legal under federal terrorism statutes. We'll parallel construct from there. Jack finished bandaging Ethan's arm with practiced efficiency. In English, counselor, it means we'll rebuild the investigation using legal means now that we know exactly where to look. Martinez closed the laptop. I need to make some calls. We're moving on the warehouse officially within the hour. Left alone with Vanessa Daniel and Jack, Ethan finally allowed himself to feel the adrenaline crash. His arm throbbed, but the pain was distant manageable. What happens now? He asked, suddenly exhausted. Now we wait, Jack replied, checking his weapon out of habit. The feds do their thing, round up Victor's network. You and Emma can finally start living without looking over your shoulders. And what about Victor himself? Daniel asked, voice barely audible. He'll still be alive, still plotting. He won't stop, not ever. He'll be transferred to a maximum security facility, Vanessa said. No privilege, no contact with the outside world. Complete isolation. You don't know my father like I do? Daniel shook his head. He'll find a way. He always does. Dawn was breaking when Martinez returned, her expression grim, despite what should have been good news. The raid was successful. We arrested 27 of Victor's operatives, including 3 police officers, a judge, and an assistant district attorney. The evidence is secure. She paused, visibly hesitating. But there's been a development. Victor Reynolds escaped during a prison transfer 2 hours ago. The room went silent. Ethan felt ice spread through his veins. How he finally managed. The transport van was ambushed. 2 guards killed. Professional job. Martinez looked directly at Ethan. We believe he's coming for you, all of you. Emma, Ethan began, reaching for his phone. Is safe, Martinez assured him. We've already placed agents with your sister. Victor doesn't know where she is. But he knows where I am, Ethan realized. My house. It's the first place he'll look. We've already dispatched a team. Ethan's phone rang, cutting her off. Unknown number. He put it on speaker, a sense of dread settling over him like a physical weight. Mr. Reed, Victor's voice was smooth, controlled, as if he were calling from a business meeting rather than as an escaped convict. I believe it's time we concluded our business, don't you? There's no business between us, Victor. Just justice. A cold laugh came through the speaker. Justice, is that what you call breaking into my property, stealing my files, turning my son against me? No. Mr. Reed, what you've done requires a more personal response. You're surrounded, Victor, Martinez interjected. Every law enforcement agency in the state is looking for you. Ah, Miss Martinez, always so confident in a system I've manipulated for decades. Victor's tone remained conversational. But I didn't call to discuss my travel plans. I called to make Mr. Reed an offer. I'm not interested in anything you have to offer, Ethan said flatly. Not even your wife's final moments. Victor's words hung in the air like poison. I have something you might want to see, Mr. Reed. A recording from Lisa's car. The dashcam captured everything, her realization that the brakes had failed, her desperate attempts to control the vehicle, her last words as she went over that cliff. Ethan couldn't breathe. The room spun around him. You're lying, Vanessa said, her voice shaking. There was no dashcam in Lisa's car. Oh, but there was, installed by my people weeks before the accident. Insurance, you might say. Victor's satisfaction was palpable. I'll be at your house in 1 hour, Mr. Reed. Come alone, or I release the video to every news outlet in the country. Let your daughter see how her mother really died. The line went dead. It's a trap, Jack said immediately. Of course it is, Ethan agreed. But if that recording exists, you can't seriously be considering going. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. I can't let Emma see that, I won't. Ethan stood, decision made. I'm going, but not alone and not unprepared. The next hour was a flurry of activity. Martinez called in every favor she had, assembling a tactical team that would remain out of sight until needed. Jack contributed his own expertise, devising a plan that would give Ethan maximum protection while still appearing to comply with Victor's demand. He'll have men watching the house, Jack warned. They'll report if they see anyone but you approach. So we give them what they expect to see, Ethan replied. He arrived at his house exactly 1 hour after Victor's call, driving his own truck, apparently alone. In reality, Jack and a federal tactical team had established positions around the neighborhood. Vanessa and Daniel were stationed 2 blocks away, with Martinez monitoring the situation through surveillance equipment hastily installed in Ethan's home. The house was dark as Ethan approached, unlocking the door with steady hands that belied his racing heart. Inside, nothing appeared disturbed. He moved through the familiar rooms, senses heightened, where that Victor could be anywhere. He found him in Emma's bedroom, sitting casually on her bed, holding her favorite stuffed bear. She has your eyes, Victor observed as if they were having a normal conversation. But her mother's smile, I imagine. Put down my daughter's toy, Ethan said evenly, fighting the urge to launch himself at the man who'd destroyed his family. Victor complied with exaggerated politeness. You came alone. Good. I appreciate a man who follows instructions. Where's the recording, all business? Victor sighed dramatically. No small talk, no questions about my daring escape. I don't care how you got out. I care about finishing this. As do I. Victor stood straightening his jacket somehow. Despite being a fugitive, he was impeccably dressed. The recording is merely leverage, Mr. Reed. What I really want is to watch you suffer before you die. Ethan forced himself to remain still as Victor circled him like a shark. You've already taken everything from me. Not everything. Victor's smile was chilling. Not your daughter, not yet. Ethan's control snapped. He lunged forward, but Victor was surprisingly quick for his age. He sidestepped at producing a gun from his jacket. Predictable, he chided. Your emotions make you weak, Mr. Reed. They always have. And your lack of them makes you a monster, Ethan countered, painfully aware of the gun aimed at his chest. Is that why your son turned against you? Because he saw what you really are? A flicker of genuine pain crossed Victor's face, quickly replaced by cold fury. Daniel is a disappointment. Soft like his mother, I gave him everything, and in return he betrayed me. He chose to be a decent human being. I'd call that a success, not a betrayal. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. Enough talk. On your knees, Mr. Reed. Ethan complied, slowly calculating distances, angles, options. The transmitter in his watch would have alerted Jack to the escalating situation. Help would be coming, but he needed to keep Victor talking. Before you pull that trigger, tell me one thing, Ethan said, looking up at his enemy. Was it worth it? All the people you killed, all the lives you destroyed, did it make you happy? Something complicated passed across Victor's face. Not remorse exactly, but perhaps recognition. Happiness is for children and fools, Mr. Reed. I built an empire. I wielded power that men like you can't even imagine. And now you're alone. Hunted, your son despises you. Your legacy is in ruins. You have nothing. I have this moment. Victor raised the gun to Ethan's forehead. I have the satisfaction of watching you die, knowing your daughter will grow up an orphan, wondering why her father wasn't strong enough to protect himself. Just like I did. Understanding dawned on Ethan. This isn't about Lisa or Vanessa or business. This is about your mother. The woman who couldn't protect you from the men who killed her. Victor's hand trembled slightly, the first crack in his perfect control. You know nothing about my mother. I know she died in debt to dangerous men. I know you found her body. I know you've spent your whole life trying to become the kind of man who could have saved her, powerful, ruthless, untouchable. Shut up, Victor snarled, pressing the gun harder against Ethan's head. But you became the very thing that destroyed her. Ethan continued, sensing the weakness in Victor's armor. You became the monster in someone else's story, in Emma's story. For a moment, genuine conflict showed in Victor's eyes, a glimpse of the man he might have been in another life. Then his features hardened again. Goodbye, Mr. Reed. The gunshot was deafening in the small bedroom. Ethan flinched instinctively but felt no pain. Instead, Victor staggered backward, a crimson stain spreading across his pristine shirt. Behind him, framed in the doorway, stood Daniel, guns still raised. Daniel! Victor gasped, genuine shock in his voice as he collapsed to the floor. My own son. Daniel moved into the room, his face a mask of grief and resolution. You gave me no choice. Victor coughed, blood staining his lips. You're more like me than you think. No. Daniel knelt beside his dying father. I'm not killing you because I hate you. I'm stopping you because someone has to. Because there's no other way to end this. Ethan backed away, giving father and son their final moment. He could hear commotion outside Jack and the tactical team moving in now that shots had been fired. Rebecca, Victor whispered, using a name Ethan didn't recognize. Then his eyes went blank, staring at nothing. Daniel placed the gun carefully on the floor and stood. Rebecca was my mother's name. He never spoke it, not once since she died. the room filled with federal agents, Martinez among them. She took in the scene with a professional glance, then approached Daniel. What happened here? He was about to kill Mr. Reed. I had no choice. Daniel's voice was hollow, distant. Martinez nodded, already constructing the narrative that would appear in the official reports. Clear self-defense, protecting an innocent civilian from an escaped murderer. Ethan found Vanessa in the hallway, her face pale but composed. It's over, she said simply. Really over this time. Is it? Ethan wasn't sure he believed in endings anymore. Not clean ones, anyway. The aftermath unfolded with surprising speed. Victor's body was removed. Statements were taken, evidence collected. Daniel was questioned extensively, but ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing. By morning, the house was empty of everyone except Ethan, Vanessa, and Jack. I've called my sister, Ethan said, collapsing onto the couch. Emma can come home tomorrow. The agents will fly back with her. What will you tell her? Vanessa asked, sinking into a chair across from him. The truth. A version of it, anyway. That the bad man who hurt her mom is gone and can't hurt anyone else ever again. Jack cleared his throat awkwardly. I should head out. You two need rest. After he left, silence fell between Ethan and Vanessa. Not uncomfortable, just weighted with everything they'd been through together. What now? She finally asked. Now we rebuild, one day at a time. 3 months passed. Winter gave way to the first tentative signs of spring. Emma returned to school, where she was thriving despite, or perhaps because of, everything she'd experienced. Ethan's construction business picked up new clients, including a contract to renovate a community center funded by the Morgan Foundation. Vanessa's new venture built from the ashes of her previous company. Daniel disappeared for a while after his father's death, eventually sending postcards from remote locations. Finding my own path, he wrote, learning to be good. The legal aftermath of Victor's empire continued to ripple through Colorado's power structures. Thanks to the evidence from the warehouse raid, dozens of corrupt officials were indicted. Cristina Martinez was being mentioned as a potential candidate for state attorney general. Life settled into new patterns. Vanessa found a place of her own, though she still came over for dinner several times a week. Emma adored her, and the feeling was clearly mutual. One evening, as Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, Ethan found Vanessa on the back porch watching the sunset. Daniel called. He told her, joining her on the bench. He's starting a foundation to help children who've lost parents to violence. Asked if we'd be on the board. What did you say? I said we'd think about it. Ethan watched as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. I was actually thinking about starting something similar myself, in Lisa's name. Vanessa turned to him, surprise evident on her face. Really? The Lisa Reed Foundation for Truth and Justice, helping people who want to stand up and do the right thing like she did. Ethan hadn't realized how much he'd been thinking about it until the words came out. Her death meant something. I want her life to mean even more. She'd be proud of you, Vanessa said softly. Of Emma, too. She's an extraordinary child. She has her mother's strength. They sat in companionable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Somewhere inside, Emma laughed at something on television, a sound that had once seemed impossibly distant in the dark days after Lisa's death. I've been offered a job, Vanessa said suddenly, running an ethical investment fund in New York. It's a good opportunity. Ethan felt an unexpected pang at the thought of her leaving. When would you start? That's the thing, she hesitated. I turned it down. Why? Vanessa gestured toward the house, toward Emma's laughter. Because in the strangest way possible, I found a family here. People who know the worst things I've been through and still want me around. I'm not ready to give that up. Ethan reached for her hand, an intimacy they hadn't allowed themselves before. I'm glad. The touch was simple, undemanding, but it held promise of healing, of possibility of a future neither of them could have imagined when they first met in those Colorado woods. Lisa would approve, you know, Vanessa said after a moment. Of us being friends. Of you moving forward. I think so too, Ethan agreed. She always said life was for the living. Inside, Emma called out that her favorite show was starting. Ethan stood still, holding Vanessa's hand. Coming, ding. Yes, Vanessa smiled, rising to join him. I'm coming. 6 months after Victor Reynolds' death, they held a memorial service. Not for him, but for his victims. 23 photos on 23 easels. Lisa's in the center. Families came from across the state, Some Ethan had never met, all bound by shared loss and newfound truth. Luis Moreno's widow spoke, tears streaming down her face. For 10 years, I blamed myself. Thought if I hadn't asked him to work overtime, he'd have been home safe. Now I know it wasn't my fault. It wasn't an accident. That knowledge doesn't bring him back, but it brings peace. Judge Patricia Williams' daughter held her infant son named after the grandmother he'd never meet. My mother died fighting corruption. She was a hero.